right, so welcome to What's in Those AI Generated Foraging Guides. Anyway, with me, Rebecca Lexa. I am your instructor today. I am a certified Oregon Master Naturalist. That means I am a citizen naturalist. I also do a lot of other community level natural history classes. I teach on bird watching. I teach on foraging. I teach a little bit of geology, several other topics. So you're welcome to look on my website for my class schedule. I also lead nature tours throughout the Pacific Northwest, both on a scheduled and a private hire basis. So that's basically if you want to go hiking and you want me to go with you and tell you about all the cool stuff we're seeing along the way, that's what I do. I am a nature writer, and I've written several little self-published chapbooks on a variety of natural history topics, but I'm very excited that next year, in fact, almost a year from now, will be the publication of a big book, The Everyday Naturalist, How to Identify Animals, Plants, and Fungi Wherever You Go. That's coming out from 10 Speed Press, June 2025. Should be out just in time for next year's summer solstice, so that's very exciting. And when I am not doing nature work for a living, I am also out in nature for the fun of it. Not that the work isn't fun, of course, but I love going hiking. I'm a birder, and I do some kayaking and so forth. So pretty much any opportunity I get to go outside is, good for me on a variety of levels. So I do want to mention that I am teaching this class from unceded Chinook land. If you want to learn how to help the Chinook Indian Nation regain federal recognition, which would give them access to a lot of really valuable resources like healthcare, treaty rights, things like that, you can find some easy ways to help them at chinookjustice.org. Finally, one disclaimer before we leap into this, because we are talking about foraging as a topic. Although we're talking more about the books, but I want to add this in anyway. I'm not responsible for any mishaps, injuries, illnesses, or deaths that result from you eating something that you shouldn't. Always be 110% sure you know what you're about to eat is edible. This class is going to be recorded and uploaded to my YouTube channel with public visibility. If you want to discuss any material from this class privately, you don't want to be in the recording, that's fine. Just contact me at RebeccaTheNaturalist@gmail.com. So let's just go ahead and open up with what the problem of AI generated foraging books is. So you've probably heard about generative artificial intelligence, which basically can, depending on the program, produces either words or images based on what it has supposedly learned, as much as an AI can learn, from other material made by actual human beings. And there's been a pretty big surge in AI generated material over the last couple of years, and that includes books, particularly on Amazon. Not exclusively, but Amazon's Kindle Direct tends to have a lot of the AI generated market. And so this screenshot right here was shared on Twitter last year, and that's where I first learned about the problem of AI generated foraging books. I should not have been surprised that somebody decided to do that. Disappointed, yes, but I really shouldn't have been surprised. So this was back in August when I first heard about it, and there have been other foraging instructors who have been making a lot of noise about the problem since then. So this class is basically a way to sum up what the problem is, how to identify these things, what to do about it, etc. So how are these books written? They're generally written with programs like ChatGPT Plus and Jasper. There are a number of others out there. Some of them will use image generators like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. This right here is an AI generated picture of mushrooms and chocolate from one of the many AI foraging books that I had to look through to actually research this particular class. And it's pretty obviously AI generated. It's got that very shiny, plasticky, not quite real look to it. We're not going to get a ton into how to identify AI generated imagery, because that's a whole different class in of itself. But this is a pretty good example of some of the more blatantly obvious AI images that I found in some of the books. Some of these books are actually using real photos, but there's really no way to tell how many of them are public domain and how many of them are copyrighted works being used without permission. Given that AI is based on copyright violation of its source materials, I'm going to guess that the people who are putting these foraging guides together are not that concerned about the copyright of the images they use as well. Speaking of copyright, I do want to mention AI generated works cannot be legally copyrighted in the United States. This link right here from the government's actual copyright department has a really good summary of that decision that was made. So yes, these foraging guides have supposed copyright information at the front of the book saying blah, 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 this is copyrighted, cannot be reproduced, etc., etc. However, if that book has been written with AI and has not been substantially edited since then that copyright claim actually does not hold water. Same thing goes for images like this one. So I mentioned a moment ago that AI generation is based on the theft of copyrighted material. So here's the thing. Even though an AI may not directly copy the exact words of a book or website or other piece of material that was fed into the database that it was trained on, all these bits and pieces and works of copyrighted material that were entered into the database in the first place, that are copyrighted, they were entered into those training databases without the consent or compensation of the copyright holders. And that's a problem. You know, I've actually found some of my writing in these databases, and I'm not happy about it because I did not say that it was okay to use my work in that way. That's kind of the point of copyright of human created works, is that we get to determine what happens to it. So for example, this class right now, this is technically a copyrighted creative work. As I'm working on it, as I'm producing it here, it's automatically covered by US copyright. And I am choosing to teach this class for free, and I'm choosing to put the recording up for free. But I also have my chapbooks, which I generally ask people to give me a few dollars for before I give them access to it. That's part of what copyright is about. And because there really hadn't been much precedent for AI generated, for the databases that AI programs use and are trained on, there really wasn't much of a precedent as to permissions and so forth for that sort of thing. The people developing these softwares just decide, we're just going to go ahead and do it. It's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, as they say. But the thing is, without those works of real humans, AI would have nothing to work with. AI cannot just spontaneously generate an image or words without having had something to to give it that inspiration. We can walk outside and see the world and think about it and consider it. AI can't do that. It has to have writing and images that were specifically created by humans in order for it to do what it does. And as I said, while AI doesn't necessarily copy existing text word for word, what it does is it regurgitates information that was originally compiled by human creators without citing any sources. Now, I have a bachelor's degree in English, a master's degree in psychology, and I'm a professional writer. I have as I said, I have a book, a professionally published book through 10 Speed Press coming out next year. I've had to learn a little bit of something about citing sources. So even if you are not copying word for word from things, if you're not citing your sources, you're engaging in plagiarism. And not a single one of the AI generated foraging guides that I looked at for purposes of this class, none of them had a bibliography or citations. So where did this information come from? You know, even when I'm writing some things, you know, my little chat books or my articles and so forth, I cite my sources. My articles have links to the sources I used, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big problem right there. And that's where a lot of the uproar over AI generation in general is coming from. All right, so can AI write a foraging guide? I mean, technically, yeah. AI can compile words that approximate information about wild plants and fungi, and they're going to pull that from various copyrighted works fed into the training database. What they don't have, what an AI text generator does not have, are the experience and skills that foragers need to be successful. Yes, you can read as many books as you want, but unless you actually go outside and do some foraging, you're not going to be a really reliable source, you know? So some of the things that an actual human can do is go outside to physically collect wild plants and mushrooms, actually studying them in the field, looking at them in all 3 dimensions, getting a good feel for them, literally, physically, knowing where to find them. You know, I am always, every time I'm outside, doesn't matter whether I'm in the middle of the city or the middle of nowhere, I am constantly paying attention to the nature around me. Animals, plants, fungi, etc. And if I notice something that I know is edible, I'm going to file that away in my memory for the future, because now I know where to go to get that particular plant or mushroom. The other thing that an actual human does while they're out in the field, they're assessing things like ripeness and freshness and whether this is ready to pick or not. Your AI has never had those experiences, nor has it used field guides, websites, classes, foraging groups, and other resources to correctly identify a species and determine edibility. All it can do is spit out information from others. It can't actually look at a bundle of leaves or berries or a mushroom and figure out, is this ready to eat? Even if you know it's an edible species, those berries might not be ripe. That mushroom might be too old. All the AI might be able to say is, well, it's such and such species. And even then, it's an educated guess. And finally, an AI cannot critically assess the accuracy and quality of a given resource and recognize dangerous misinformation. So there are a lot of foraging books out there. There are a lot of websites. There are a lot of people on foraging book groups on Facebook and Reddit and so forth. And yeah, we'd like to think that they're all good, reliable sources, but they're not. Some are better than others. Some are kind of questionable. Some are standing on shaky ground. And the AI does not have the ability to assess, is this piece of information reliable or not? We're going to see later on where AI just tosses in things that are patently wrong and did not have the critical thinking skills to say, oh, well, that's not right. You know, you may have seen some screenshots online of people doing a Google search, and Google's AI pops up with a summary that has absolutely wrong information because it drew from either something that was misinformation or that was outright fiction or satire and presented it as the truth. So that is the power of working with an actual human writer as opposed to AI. All right, so aren't there AI tools for all that I just talked about? Not really. I mean, yeah, AI can generate a list of places to go to look for a particular species, but it's based on secondhand knowledge. For example, I love the app iNaturalist. It's a free app for any kind of smartphone where you can use it to identify animals, plants, and fungi. And if you go to the Explore tab, either on your phone or on the browser, and you search for a particular species, yeah, it'll populate a list of where users of iNaturalist have found whatever that species is. But the AI itself can't go out there and verify that, yes, those species are there. AI can use databases and algorithms to compare living plants and fungi to potential species. You know, if you take a picture of something, iNaturalist can give you suggestions of what it thinks it is based on the photos, but it can't verify the information in a given source that's drawing from. So one of these programs like Jasper or ChatGPT Plus, et cetera, they can, you know, pull up information on certain edible plants and fungi, but they can't verify whether the information they pulled is actually true or not. It can replicate book knowledge, but has no life experience. And any forager worth their salt is going to tell you that, yeah, books are great, but you actually have to go out there and do it yourself to actually really learn what you're doing. And human authors bring that to their foraging guides, not just in the sense of anecdotes, but just knowing, okay, does this information that I learned from a book actually match what I found when I was out in the field looking at these actual species? And finally, the people who generate AI foraging guides and other books, they're not fact checking them. They're not going through and reading them in order to figure out, okay, is this accurate? Is this accurate? No, they're basically just churning out as many of these as they possibly can for money. I would be willing to bet that none of the people who are behind these AI generated foraging guides actually go foraging. They just picked on it as a hot topic that they could make some money on. So AI tools cannot do the things that humans do. It kind of reminded me of this great scene from Captain America Civil War. We've got Vision over here. He's a synthezoid, which is a kind of android that's meant to be very human-like. And then we have Scarlet Witch, Wanda, over here on the right. And Vision has been sitting here trying to make chicken paprikash. And of course, he gets it wrong. And she realizes that he gets it wrong. And he says, in my defense, I haven't actually eaten anything before. And that's basically what AI is like. You know, it has never gone foraging, so it's basically going on guesswork and regurgitation of information. Doesn't sound very safe? No, that's because it's not. Foraging has become very popular. It's also become very romanticized. I have run into more than one person who, for example, came to one of my classes and started out with this idea that, oh, foraging is this wonderful romantic cottagecore thing. I'm going to go out into the woods and pick my food. It's going to be nice and clean and non-industrialized. And then by the end of my class, they realize, oh, wow, this is actually serious business. It could be potentially life and death. I'm still going to do it, but I'm going to be a lot more cautious, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, even though foraging does have that sort of lovely cottagecore, naturecore, et cetera, feel to it, it still is a risky practice. And it can literally be a life and death matter. There are still people who get poisoned and who die from eating something that they misidentified. So just like you wouldn't trust AI to diagnose an illness or treat an injury, you wouldn't go to ChatGPT and throw in some symptoms and have it give you an answer and then not go see a doctor, So in the same way, AI should not be trusted as a reliable source regarding edible versus toxic species because it doesn't have the ability to critically think about the resources that it's drawing from. It's basically just copying and throwing back at you whatever it sucked up from its database. So with that said, what is actually in the books? So I still feel really gross about this, but I kind of had to do it. I had to actually buy some of the ebooks of these foraging guides from Amazon so that I could actually look inside them to see what was in there. So I did that so that you people don't have to do that. So you're welcome for my sacrifice. Anyway, in seriousness, though, I wanted to include some information on AI foraging guides as part of the Everyday Naturalist, the book that I was writing at the time. And so basically I bought a bunch of them and took a look at them, and these next few slides are going to go into some of what I found. And I want to emphasize, the thing that a lot of people are worried about is that they're really, really bad telling people to do things like how to make, food with death cap mushrooms, which, by the way, yes, those are one of the really deadly mushrooms that will dissolve your liver and kill you. Or, how to make deadly nightshade jam. Yeah, we don't need that. Thankfully, I didn't find anything like that in any of the books that I bought. And I think I probably got like 15, 16 of them. So I wanted to have a good basis for comparison. So I didn't find any really outright, telling you to go eat a specifically deadly species. So that's a good thing. It's not a very good thing, but it's a good thing. I didn't find as much misinformation as I did missing information. And that is a problem, because when you don't have enough information to go on, you can still get into trouble, because often what's missing is going to be crucial to safe identification or safe consumption of a given species. If all you have is a sentence or two about a particular species, that's not really going to be enough information to tell you, how do I identify it? How do I tell whether it's edible or not? If it is edible, is there a particular way that I need to prepare it to make it safe to eat? So it's not so much about what is there, it's about what's not there. So, good example, Mushrooms Guide Master by Ahmad Max. You can see here, this is a screenshot of the single page on the fairy ring mushroom that was being touted as an edible species. What it didn't do, this is literally it. It says fairy ring mushroom, small flavorful mushrooms often used in soups and stews. And that's literally it. This little picture, and I'm not even sure if that's an actual photo or AI generated, the name and that particular sentence. And I'm not even entirely sure if that is Marasmius aureatus, which is the fairy ring mushroom, which is generally considered to be edible. There are a lot of what foragers call LBMs, little brown mushrooms. And there are any of a number of small, rather nondescript brown mushrooms, kind of like this one, with a skinny little stem and a little umbrella-shaped cap, and they're usually no more than a couple inches tall. And a lot of them look alike. And yeah, Marasmius aureatus is edible. A lot of your little brown mushrooms are not edible, but not especially dangerous. But then you do have a few little brown mushrooms that will kill you, like Conicide phalaris. That one will definitely make you dead if you eat enough of it. And so the problem with this being the sum total of the information about the quote-unquote fairy ring mushroom, notice it doesn't say what species it is. There are a lot of mushrooms that form fairy rings, and most of them are not going to be edible. And so there's nothing about that differentiation in the book. So ostensibly, somebody could go pick any mushroom that's growing in a ring and say, well, this book told me it was edible. And they're going to be in trouble if it's the wrong mushroom. So that's really where a lot of the danger comes in, is what's not being included. Continuing with that same book, most of the section on poisonous species is just photos labeled toadstool mushroom. So these are a few examples. It just says toadstool is a term often used to describe poisonous or inedible mushrooms, but does not refer to a specific scientific classification or species of mushroom. The term toadstool is more of a layman's term and lacks a clear botanical definition. And then basically after this, it was several pages of images of various mushrooms. This is some kind of an amanita here. I think these might be some kind of Coprinopsis here. And it just says toadstool, toadstool, toadstool. No information, no specific species included. It doesn't say what species it is. Any good foraging guide or website or class that teaches you about poisonous mushrooms, at the very least, is going to give you the name of it. We don't have that here. I mean, these foraging guides are barely even approaching anything that could be considered the bare minimum of useful because of this. So another good example with plants. Multiple books mentioned elderberries as edible berries. None of them mention that you have to cook the elderberries in order to neutralize toxins in them. If somebody's only going on AI foraging books, they may eat them raw and get sick. They got cyanide in them. And while blue and black elderberries are generally considered to be edible and properly prepared, there's a lot of debate as to whether red elderberries are safe to eat, whether cooked or not. And regardless of what side of that you fall on as an author, at the very least, you should be mentioning that there is that debate over red elderberries. Never mind the fact that regardless of color, the elderberries need to be cooked. None of the foraging guides that I looked at had anything to say about that. They also tend to omit other important safety concerns. For example, one of the things I teach in my foraging classes, if you're trying a new species for the first time, try a small amount, just a few bites, properly prepared, to make sure you don't have any bad reactions. Nobody said anything about that or any of the other safety tips that I add in my classes. One particular cookbook called DIY Tasty Chocolate Mushroom Making Recipe Book. That's one that had that mushroom and chocolates image at the beginning of the class. It's written by someone named Katrina Tauscher, and it has all kinds of information on how to add psilocybe mushrooms to your chocolate recipes. What it doesn't have is warnings about potential health or legal complications. And there is no information on how to tell them apart from dangerous lookalikes, like, for example, Foliatina rugosa, also known as Conocybe rugosa. And I mean, what I found was it'd be hilarious if it wasn't so dangerous. So check this out. This is a screenshot from the search results of the book, searching for the author's name. The name is misspelled. And that's a big red flag because, you know, yeah, typos happen, but if the author's own name is misspelled, that's probably not a good sign about the veracity of the rest of the book, okay? So, again, it's a lot of omission as opposed to outright bad information, but there were some exceptions. This is a quote from Pacific Northwest Foraging Field Guide by Kennard Wheatley. Said, "This plant," referring to stinging nettle, "grows on snow or fertile soil in late January, especially in the Northwest." No, it doesn't. Shows up in the spring here. "The stinging quality of nettles from the strongly serrated edges." No, it's not. The edges have nothing to do with the sting. The sting is from little urticating hairs on the leaves that basically act as little injection needles with an irritant. And it doesn't mention anything about the urticating hairs until later on in the book. "Hardly or never would you find nettles maturing or developing in the same place." I don't even know what they mean by that. Yeah, that was special. Especially bad. And then later on in the book mentioned oh yeah, you can just handle nettles barehanded, not a big deal. No mention of wearing gloves to protect yourself from the stinging hairs. And so yes, this was one of the few examples where we were getting really bad misinformation that could be dangerous, not deadly, thankfully, but still dangerous and just plain wrong. There's also a lack of fact checking. Edible Wild Plant for Beginner, not beginners, beginner, by Rachel Smith, said, for example, bananas can become poisonous when you consume too many. So this is a myth that's been floating around about bananas for years. There's a comedian named Carl Pilkington who basically said in a skit or an interview or something, it wasn't meant to be serious, but he said if you eat more than 6 bananas, you can get potassium toxicity. However, this great fact-checking article from the BBC website says you actually need to eat about 400 bananas to get to potassium toxicity. Now, anybody who's actually checking their facts for their book is going to research whether that fact about bananas causing toxicity after eating 6 of them is true or not. And they're going to find, I mean, literally that was one of the first websites that came up when I just did a quick Google, was this BBC thing. It doesn't take very long to check your facts, and they're not doing that. And that's another way that you can tell that it's AI generated, is the fact that it's just this information is just regurgitated wholesale. No fact checking, nothing. And that's because, you know, the AI picked up on websites that repeated that myth that Pilkington said and repeated it as fact. And I have met actual people who believed it, unfortunately. But then you just give them that website here and you tell them, hey, no, that's not actually the case. And they say, oh, hey, thank you for telling me. And then they know better. So an author should definitely know better on something like that. Inaccurate photos. So we've been talking a lot about the text. Let's look a little bit at the photos that I found. Some of them were wrong. But again, a lot of cases just there wasn't enough. Some things were not illustrated at all. And usually when something was illustrated, it had exactly one photo. Now, any good foraging guide is going to have multiple photos of the same plant or mushroom to give you a really good idea of what it looks like. Or if it has just one photo, it's going to be a really solid photo that gives you a good close look at what you're trying to identify, okay? That's not what I found here. I found a lot of things that definitely were not what they were supposed to be. This, for example, is not purslane. Yeah, the flowers look a little similar, but those are definitely not purslane leaves. This is absolutely not cattails. These are horsetails. That's definitely, I'm not sure what this is, but it's definitely not wild onion. And in addition to things that were not what they were supposed to be, I actually found a couple books that had nothing but AI generated images. The mushroom chocolate book was all AI generated. This is another good example. It's a chapter header, and I think these in the middle. I think they're trying really hard to be boletes, and they're really not. And as the rest of these, you can see, it's got that very fake, shiny appearance of AI generated images. Now, these next few images are from Andrew Kyle's book. A later edition does have more accurate photos, but the edition that I first downloaded last year had these pretty amazingly bad AI generated images. These are supposedly dandelions, which is hilarious because they kind of look like a cross between a dandelion and an English daisy. And I'm not even sure what's going on with this huge mono leaf right here. These were supposedly strawberries on a stalk. And the leaves, again, don't really have any rhyme or reason. This was purslane. Purslane tends to get a lot, apparently is popular for not getting good images here. These look more like mutant petunias here with, I'm not even sure what those leaves are supposed to be. And plantain, once again, here's poor horsetail. being used as a model for something it's not. In this case, plantain. That's definitely not plantain. So yeah, there's some misinformation again with the photos, but generally it's a lack of photos. One of the most common traits of an AI-generated foraging guide is scads of overly flowery text that basically don't amount to anything. So your images are off, your text is off, but often your text is just plain empty. So a lot of these books include and or promoted with a cute little story about some person in a village who happened to find a foraging book and went on to become an amazing forager, beloved by their entire community. And the goal of that is to entice readers into thinking that they too can be the hero of their overly romanticized foraging story. And of course, as I'm writing this, I'm thinking facts, who needs them when you are super forager? And then of course, I got my brain going on that whole super forager thing. I found this public domain image, forget who the artist was, but it's from like 1800s. And thought, oh, hey, look, it's, super forager, blithely gathering pretty flowers for her cottagecore feast with all the wooden animals after she found this very PowerPoint in her village and blah, 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 blah. That's basically the kind of thing that these books are doing. They are saying, hey, you want to be, the super amazing forager off in the woods, picking your food, and everybody is going to see you as this wonderful bastion of, food security and leading the world into a time where we no longer have industrialized food, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Basically getting people with that hyper romanticized idea of foraging. And you're going to see this trope again and again and again and again. If you go on the Amazon page for a foraging book, and the only thing it has for a description of the book is one of these stories, that's pretty much absolute confirmation that it is AI generated, because any actual human foraging instructor is or writer is going to put the actual description of the book to tell you what's actually in there, not some pretty little story that's going to make you think that you're going to be super forager. Okay. It's also not just the introductory stories that are full of that fluff and nonsense. The following quote, my notes are in brackets, is from the Poisonous Species chapter of the Wild Edible Plant Foraging for Beginners by Dr. Andrew Kyle. The dance of identification. Navigating the realm of poisonous lookalikes requires a dance of identification, a delicate choreography that weaves together visual cues, tactile sensations, and sensory experiences. Engage your senses fully as you touch, without gloves, smell, and closely examine each plant. A cautious touch can reveal texture differences. Like what? Inhale deeply to catch the faint whispers of aroma that can be a telltale sign of danger or delight. We're going to get back to that in a moment. Every plant you encounter becomes a partner in this intricate dance, and your discerning gaze becomes the conductor of a symphony of survival. The entire chapter on identification of poisonous species is like that. He never actually tells you how to identify them. It's just paragraphs and paragraphs of the dance of identification. And I have a lot of words about that. Not all of them are good. I'm trying to keep this somewhat family friendly, so I'm going to keep some of those words to myself, okay? But the thing that, going back to this whole, the faint whispers of aroma that can be a telltale sign of danger or delight. Here's the thing. You can't tell by smell whether a species is edible or not. You can tell whether something is spoiled, sure, but you can't smell poison hemlock versus Queen Anne's lace and know which one is the poisonous one. So that's just a load of malarkey right there. Continuing Kyle's book, if you want to learn about fermentation, here are his instructions. Fermenting, unleashing flavor and nutrition. Fermentation is a magical process that unlocks hidden depths of flavor and enhances nutritional content. Fermented wild plants like sauerkraut made from foraged greens or kimchi from wild radishes transform into probiotic-rich delicacies that not only tantalize the taste buds, but also promote gut health. During fermentation, beneficial microorganisms transform sugars, starches into lactic acid, creating a tangy and complex taste profile. Embarking on this journey requires careful attention to sanitation and the proper balance of ingredients, resulting in creations that dance with a symphony of flavors. I guess that magical dance journey thing is so magical that the reader just instinctively knows how to unlock that magical process without any actual instruction, because, you know, magic. And then by the time I got done with this slide, this was literally all I could think about. Dance, magic, dance. I love David Bowie. I love Labyrinth. And I've had that song stuck in my head ever since then. But that's pretty much what that made me think of. And again, there was no actual instruction in the book onto how to actually make, for example, kimchi or sauerkraut or other fermented foods. It was basically just talking about the dance of fermentation. Dance, dance, da, da, da. It's that hyper-romanticization. And AI-generated text also tends to be heavy on extraneous adjectives and adverbs. That's another tell that it might be AI-generated. All right, so getting into those details, it's generally going to be, these books are often poorly written, but in a robotic sort of way. It's kind of hard to explain. I have been an editor in the past professionally, and it's kind of hard to pin down what exactly makes it obvious that this was badly written by a human versus this was badly written by an AI. It's kind of like the overall feel of it just doesn't feel quite human. It feels like, yes, I am a real human being, not a robot. Trust me, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Formulaic writing with flowery language that says nothing of substance. Again, that tends to be common in those foraging books because they want you to be captured by that whole romanticized, you're going to be super forager thing. That lack of information and misinformation, those are very common. And it's even more so than in something that was actually written by a human, just not very well. Even a really bad essay or article on foraging by a human tends to have at least more information than these books do. Repetitive text. I found several books where the same phrases or even entire paragraphs would be repeated in different parts of the book, with no real rhyme or reason. And it happened often enough that it wasn't just an accidental copy paste that the person didn't catch. The title may have typos. Notice that some of the titles that I have mentioned are obviously there's a misspelling, or there's a word missing, or a letter or something that, and it's not just in the title, it's in the entire book. You know, you'll see it on the Amazon page, you'll see it on the cover of the book, you'll see it on the first page of the book. It's very obviously wrong. Also, some of them you may have noticed are packed with keywords. They're basically trying to game Amazon's system or the web or the, Google search, whatever. They're trying to pack as many keywords in there to get their AI generated book up near the top of the results. Now, not every self-published book is going to be AI generated. As I said, I have self-published a number of little chapbooks on various natural history topics. There are a lot of other good authors who use self-publishing. But AI generated books are never associated with a legitimate publisher or an established author. Okay, we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And again, that promotional text is often a pretty foraging fable with no information about the book. And often it's going to end with something like, get your copy today. So it's going to be like a big long paragraph of this long, pretty story. And it ends with, get your copy today, or get yours now, blah, 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 blah. This is another theme that I saw again and again and again when I was researching these books. There's no author bio in the book or on the Amazon page, or if there is one on the Amazon page, it's very scant on details. I'm going to show you a couple examples in a moment. And it doesn't really tell us anything concrete about them, or more importantly, their experience or credentials. The author photo is very generic close-up headshot, which is very common with AI generated photos of people. There's no information about these people online. They don't have a website. They don't have social media. They don't have any information about talks or classes or interviews. There's nothing. Now, occasionally, yeah, that will happen with a human author, but usually there's something. They have like an Instagram or a TikTok or something that they use. Consistently, your AI generated books are by nobodies. There's nothing on them anywhere except maybe their Amazon author page. And this was another red flag I ran across. Their real name or their name is the same as a real person with a definite online presence, and which means that name was likely stolen. And it's not a really common name like, Jane Smith or, John Brown, blah, blah, blah. No, it's fairly unusual, unique names. These are a few examples. So Dr. Andrew Kyle is an internist in Sacramento, California. Ahmad Max is a musician. Rebecca Sinclair. There's actually a couple of them. One is a romance novelist. One's a snowboarder. Chris Orion Rose is a painter and travel blogger. Someone tried to publish an AI generated foraging book under the name Chris Orion. Cody Benoit is a psychiatric resident at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. None of them have anything to do with foraging. If you keep digging through the results, you're not going to find anything where any of these people have ever done anything regarding foraging. So it's like these people who do the generation just look for random people online who have at least a little bit of a presence and then publish books under the name. So here's a good example. Chris Orion. You can see Chris Orion is a seasoned doctor holding multiple diplomas in nutrition, physiology, and psychology. His extensive engagement in health, food, and diet-related research has been devoted to guiding individuals, blah, 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 blah. His psychology degree has proven instrumental in aiding troubled families and individuals, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's the thing. A real person writing a book who has degrees is often going to mention those degrees in detail. If not on their author bio, then on their website or other online presence. You're going to learn something about them. It's not going to be this very general, generic thing. Somebody who has done research, especially if they have published papers, is going to mention things like that. You can find their CV online, look for them on LinkedIn. That's not here. Again, it's a whole pile of nothing. And then notice this picture, this kind of vague, dead-eyed, looking off into the distance, very closely cropped headshot. That's just a one-off, right? No. Look at this, Jason Cones. Exact same thing, looking exact same direction. That same sort of boring little smile. Look at that. Other than the beard, they can almost be this, and the glasses, they can almost be the same person. So that's very typical of the AI generated images used to say, oh, this is a real person. So here, Jason Cones. Jason Cones is a highly regarded expert in the field of health and nutrition. Okay, what credentials does he have? With an unrivaled depth of insight and extensive practical experience, blah, blah, blah. Well, can you tell us more about that? They don't have to go in huge detail, but they can mention, generally you're going to find something about them. Or a website where they can go, any author with a website is going to direct you to the website to say, hey, check out more about me. Okay? So, yeah. We're kind of getting the idea of how to tell when, a person is not a person. Very vague, no credentials, no details about experience, no online presence, etc. All right. Another thing, if you go into their list of books that they've written on Amazon, what you're going to find is the author has written a whole bunch of books on a wide range of topics that are not related to foraging and in a very short period of time. Common topics you're going to see come up again and again and again are diets for very, very specific medical conditions, marijuana, psilocybes, and other drugs, health books for seniors, because apparently seniors are a common target of the foraging books and similar AI generated stuff. Those are just a few of the trends that I notice again and again. And Jason Cones is a great example. These are just some of the books that he's written since December 2022. The Art of Acupressure, The Cancer Diet for Teens, Dawning the Year Off Right, the prostate cancer diet kitchen, etc., etc. We have not one but two. We've got cannabis infused diet cookbook and the ultimate weed gummies cookbook, etc. So we're kind of getting the idea that, you know, nobody is going to be able to reasonably write a well-researched book on any of these in that short a period of time. He had like almost a couple dozen books written in less than in like a year and a half. That's just not going to happen, folks. Okay, so look at their bibliography if they have one. What other books they've written. Look at the timing, and look at the variety of topics. You're generally not going to find somebody who has enough experience to legitimately write serious books on all of these, especially in that shorter period of time. So what the heck do we do about all this? The ease with which an unscrupulous person can churn out AI-generated foraging guides and other books means that Amazon and other websites have seen a ton of them in the last couple of years. Last year in September, Amazon limited the number of new titles published per user to 3 per day to help keep the flow somewhat slowed down. Here's an article about that. But when I was a few weeks ago, when I started putting this class back together, I took another look at Amazon. And yeah, there are more new AI-generated foraging books from a whole bunch of new authors. They are regularly appearing on Amazon. If you want to take a look, search foraging in the books category. Make sure it's selected to books over there on the left of the side of the text bar there. Type in foraging and then sort by publication date, which will put the newest ones first. And yeah, unfortunately, I feel bad for the actual human authors who have come up with foraging books since this all started, because they are mixed in there, but they're having to compete with this just continuing flood of AI-generated foraging books. They're not happening as quickly because Amazon did put that limit in, but you also have AI-generating people, the people behind them, creating more fake profiles on Amazon to get more books up. So they're still happening at a pretty regular rate. And it's kind of disappointing. And I'm not really sure what Amazon can do besides that at this level of mass production. But what we can do is be very cautious about new foraging books, especially if it's from an unknown author or publisher. Again, a new author does not mean a fake author. You want to see who published the books. Again, self-publishing does not mean it's fake. Look for information about the authors online. Generally speaking, people want to have more information about them and their work online to help people sort out, okay, who's this person I'm getting this book from? Use the clues that I've discussed in this class to figure out whether these books seem like they're AI generated, and spread the word. Share the video. When I upload the video to YouTube, I'm hoping I'll get it online tomorrow. Share the video far and wide. And for those who don't have time to watch a whole video, I've got this whole quick guide to AI book ID on my Tumblr. And I go into detail about a lot of the stuff that I talked about here, etc., etc. So, before I take final questions, I want to mention you can keep in touch with me. Here's my email address. You're welcome to email me questions. You are welcome to ask for more resources. If you're looking at a book and you want help trying to figure out whether it might be AI generated or not, feel free to send me the link and I'll take a look. Check out my website, RebeccaLexa.com. I've got information on my classes. I've got nature articles that I've written, some of which are on foraging. I have information on my upcoming book. You can join my monthly email newsletter there. So basically that's a whole hub for all the fun stuff that I do. My social media links are on the next slide. So you're welcome to follow me on any or all of those. And yeah, like I said, if there's anything else I can help with, just let me know. So with that said, do we have any questions? You can turn that microphone on or you can put it in the chat window. All right. Again, if you think of something later on, feel free to drop me an email. Again, that's my email address, Rebecca the Naturalist at gmail.com. And yeah, I think that's basically all I've got. So thank you again, folks, for joining me this morning. I really appreciate it. I hope you got some good stuff out of the class. And if there's anything, again, that I can help with, please don't hesitate to get in touch, okay? All right, thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful week.